Good day to all my fellow classmates and also to my advisor, Sir Roberto Abayan. I am Joy Francispeño from Bachelor of Elementary Education. So for today, I am going to discuss the minutes of the proceeding of the National Territory of the 1971 Constitutional Convention. Okay, let's just go to the highlight of this topic, which is the Article 1, the National Territory. But before we start a lesson, let's just enlighten our mind or enlighten our knowledge what is the meaning of the National Territory. So, okay, according to my research, the National Territory is the space delimited by that nation's borders. Within the territory, the states of that nation owns and has legislative, executive, and judicial powers. So, okay, if we're not aware of this topic, take note of this, that the framework of Constitution strongly believe that we must know our territory to avoid territorial with other country. So, since we have some knowledge regarding this topic, let's proceed to the Article 1, Section 1. So, the Article 1, Section 1 is the national territory of the Philippines shall be the archipelago of the name, the historic home of the Filipino people from its beginnings, whose boundaries are set forth in Article 3 of the Treaty of Paris concluded between the United States and Spain on the 10th day of December 1898, together with all the island embraced in the treaty concluded in Washington between the United States and Spain on the 7th day of November 1900 and in the convention concluded between the United States and Great Britain on the 2nd day of January 1930 and all other territories over which the government of the Philippines has been exercising jurisdiction or over which it has a right. So now, if you guys familiar about the article, it is one day United States who paid to this Spain to the sum of amount of $20 million within 3 months. So after the exchange of identification of Presempiti, so this Article 1 Section 1 it include any territory that we are belong or mine in the future belong to the Philippines. So okay, let's proceed to the Article 1 Section 2. So the Article 1 Section 2 is all the waters around, between and connecting the various islands of the Philippines archipelago, irrespective of their widths or dimensions, are considered necessary, appurtenances of the land territory, forming part of the inland or eternal waters of the Philippines. Okay, so much for that. I will be putting the picture of the Philippine archipelago here. And you guys consider that there are borders here. Okay, the next is section 3 is all the waters beyond the outermost islands of archipelago within the boundaries set forth in the treaties and convention mentioned in section 1 hereof comprises the territorial sea of the Philippines. Okay, the section 3 is everything from baseline to is not exceeding 12 miles is considered the state's territorial sea. Much like internal water, coastal states have sovereignty and jurisdiction over territorial sea. Okay, the next is section 4 is the sovereignty of the Philippines extends beyond its land territory and its internal waters to a belt adjacent to its coast, described as the territorial sea. Said sovereignty also extends over the airspace above its land areas, its internal waters, and territorial sea as to its land areas, its sub and subsoil. So the national territory is composed of three components, which is the terrestrial, fluvial, and aerial domain. Okay, the first component is the terrestrial domain. That it is refers the land whether agriculture lands, forest or timber, mineral lands, and natural parts under sovereignty and jurisdiction of the Philippines. So the second component is the fluvial domain that refers to the internal waters and external waters under the sovereignty or jurisdiction of the Philippines. Okay, for the last component is the aerial domain. It is the refers the airspace of all the land and waters including the outer space. Okay, so to make it easier for us to remember this part, let's take note of this code. TFA. T is for terrestrial domain, F is for fluvial domain. A is for aerial domain. So again, the code is TFA. Last but not the least is the Section 5. So the Section 5 is the National Assembly shall define the control that the Philippines will exercise in the contiguous zone and in the superjacent waters of the continental shelf. So, okay, for everyone's information, so the contiguous zone is the outer edge of our territorial sea with a maximum of 24 miles from the baseline. Okay, that will be the end of my presentation about the minutes of the proceedings on the national territory of the 1971 Constitutional Convention. So, I hope you learned something. Thank you and God bless you all.